Imagine this. You awaken one morning in a room flooded with light, but instead of clarity, there is a gnawing fog within your mind. You see countless ancient tomes lining endless shelves, their spines cracked, their pages yellowed with the breath of centuries. These are the words of philosophers who dared to confront existence itself. Plato, Socrates, Confucius, Marcus Aurelius, Lao Tzu, voices echoing across eons, wrestling with the same questions that choke your chest at dawn. Yet, no matter how fervently you read, how deeply you ponder, the truths they offer slip through your fingers like smoke. Why is it that the most profound wisdom, so meticulously preserved, remains locked away from you? What invisible barrier stands between their eternal insights and your ephemeral grasp? Here lies a paradox that no one warns you about. The truths of ancient philosophers are not universally empowering. They exist as dormant codes, like seeds scattered in the wind, needing not just recognition but commitment, a fiery will to evolve beyond the surface of your current self. The very wisdom that promises liberation can just as easily become a cage, binding the unprepared to frustration or despair. How can it be that knowledge designed to free minds instead imprisons them? What does it mean to truly master these truths if access alone isn't enough? You are faced with a riddle at the heart of human understanding. The value of ancient philosophy is contingent. It demands more than passive absorption. It demands transformation. It is not an inheritance bestowed upon those who merely stumble upon it, but a treasure earned by those willing to traverse the arduous path of change. If the ancient sages whispered secrets to the world, to whom were they really speaking? Were their words crafted for the masses, or for a select few forged by trial and resilience? Consider the unsettling tension between knowing and being. You might recite a Stoic maxim: focus not on what you cannot control, yet the moment anxiety tightens your throat, the words dissolve into hollow echoes. You understand the verse with your mind, but your body betrays that understanding with a storm of fear. This fracture between intellectual grasp and lived experience is the crucible in which evolution either flares or fizzles. How do you bridge that gap? How do you move from comprehension to embodiment? Is mere repetition the key, or must you dismantle and rebuild your very identity to integrate these truths? Philosophy offers a mirror, but mirrors can only reflect. They do not shape. It is you who must step through that reflection and walk the abyss between the familiar self and the potential self. But who is this self that must evolve? Is it the sum of your memories, your habits, your fears, each a brick in a labyrinth constructed by unexamined beliefs? Or is it something more elusive, a raw presence waiting to be unearthed beneath layers of conditioning and social expectation? When philosophers speak of knowing thyself, are they inviting you to excavate ruins or to ignite a spark that burns away all that is false? You might wonder, why does this matter now? Why should the wisdom of times long past, often cloaked in archaic languages and alien customs, hold power in an age dominated by technology and instant gratification? Because beneath the ceaseless noise of modern life lies a profound hunger, not for data or distraction, but for meaning. Ancient philosophy is not dead history. It is a living heartbeat beneath the surface of a fractured world. But that heartbeat is faint and perilous to find. It requires a kind of disciplined recklessness, a willingness to confront the void within, to stare unflinchingly at your own limitations and contradictions. And this is where the commitment reveals itself as a crucible. The truths of ancient philosophers do not welcome the faint-hearted. Evolution is no convenience store, stocked with ready-made answers for quick consumption. It is a forge, intense, unyielding, and solitary. What have you sacrificed in your life to chase comfort instead of growth? What illusions have you clung to that obstruct the path? The sage's truths make no promises of ease. Instead, they demand that you face discomfort, often profound and destabilizing, because only through such trials can the seed of transformation take root. Can you meet that demand? Will you? Pause and reflect on this. What if all the knowledge you have accumulated so far is merely the surface of a vast ocean, beneath which lies a current so strong it can carry you to an entirely new form of existence? Yet, countless seekers remain stranded on the shore, dazzled by the waves but too hesitant to dive. How do you become the diver rather than the spectator? What does it mean to master not just knowledge, but the self that must wield it? Is mastery an endpoint or an ongoing process of surrender and conquest? Before you lies a choice, cloaked in quiet urgency. Continue skimming the surface, collecting fragments of wisdom without becoming them, or step into the depths, where the ancient truths wait not passively but as living forces, ready to empower those who commit to evolve. This choice is not abstract or academic. It is the fulcrum of your very existence. To reject it is to remain tethered to patterns that no longer serve, to accept a version of yourself limited by comfort and fear. To embrace it is to awaken a latent potential that transcends time, culture, and circumstance. The question lingers, heavy and immediate. What does it truly mean to commit to evolution? How do you transform these ancient, often cryptic teachings from intellectual curiosities into the very foundation of a new self? The journey ahead will peel back illusions, provoke discomfort, and challenge every assumption you have ever held. But within that challenge lies the promise of mastery. Not mastery over others, but mastery over the labyrinth within. This is the crucible where ancient wisdom and modern spirit collide, creating a force capable of reshaping your reality. And so, as the shadows of doubt swirl around you, as the weight of potential presses against the confines of your current being, there is only one question left to confront. Are you ready to evolve? To move beyond the surface and claim the power hidden in the truths that so many have failed to master? To answer that, you must first understand the nature of these truths, not just what they say, but how they function as keys to transformation. To unravel this mystery is to begin the process of true evolution. What comes next is the unveiling of these ancient truths, not as dusty relics, but as dynamic forces that demand commitment, confrontation, and courage. The path is perilous, the rewards profound. Step forward and learn how to master what many only glimpse but few fully grasp. Imagine a silent war raging beneath the fragile surface of your everyday consciousness, a conflict so profound that it shapes the very architecture of your identity, often without your awareness. This war is not fought with swords or open words. It is waged in the shadowed recesses of your psyche, where hidden forces mold your desires, fears, and the illusions you cling to as if they were lifelines. The reason why the ancient truths remain locked behind a veil for most is because this internal battleground is guarded by something far more insidious than ignorance. It is defended by the collective machinery of psychology, philosophy, and society itself. Carl Jung once described the human psyche as an arena where opposites vie for supremacy, consciousness versus unconsciousness, light against darkness, the persona against the shadow. Your conscious self, that carefully curated identity you present to the world, acts as a fragile fortress built to keep the chaotic and often uncomfortable truths at bay. This fortress is necessary, for without it, the terror of the unknown within could overwhelm you. But this very defense mechanism also becomes a prison, a gilded cage that limits your capacity to evolve. The greatest lie you tell yourself is that you are fully known to yourself. In reality, your shadow is a vast terrain filled with suppressed desires, repressed fears, and forgotten wisdom. To approach the ancient philosophers' truths, you must first confront this shadow, not to destroy it but to integrate it. Friedrich Nietzsche pointed sharply to the roots of this internal resistance. He revealed how most people live their lives enmeshed in what he called slave morality, a system of values born from fear, weakness, and the desire for comfort. In this moral framework, the instinct to evolve is shackled by a longing for safety, conformity, and approval. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman, was not merely a call to superiority but an invitation to a radical self-overcoming, an evolution beyond inherited values and complacency. Yet, this path demands a ruthless honesty, a willingness to dismantle the self you have known, which terrifies the mind conditioned by societal norms. Isn't it paradoxical? The very system that promises security ensures stagnation, and the ancient wisdom that offers freedom demands upheaval. Arthur Schopenhauer, too, cast a somber light on the human condition. He identified the will as the ceaseless, blind force driving all existence, your desires, impulses, and suffering stitched into a relentless striving that fuels both creation and agony. This will blind you to the deeper truth, that suffering is intrinsic to life, and that escape through external means is futile. To evolve, you must recognize the illusion spun by the will, peeling away layers of craving and ignorance. But doing so requires a confrontation with pain, the very pain we instinctively flee. The ancient philosophers understood this. They did not promise pleasure or ease. They embodied a truth that evolution is a crucible that burns away complacency, not a gentle ascent. Aldous Huxley saw another dimension of this struggle in the modern world. He warned of humanity's intoxication with distraction, consumerism, and superficial comfort, what he called behaviorism on a mass scale. We are numbed by noise, sedated by pleasure, and kept docile by the relentless buzz of external stimuli. This social sedation erects walls around the mind, walls that prevent deep insight and true transformation. The ancient truths demand a stillness, a piercing clarity that breaks through this fog. But how often do you dare to sit with silence, with discomfort, or with the raw confrontation of your inner void? Huxley's insight reveals a societal conspiracy, not necessarily malevolent but no less effective, to keep the masses compliant by dulling the yearning to evolve. Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism plunges even deeper into the abyss. He declared, "Existence precedes essence," thrusting you into a terrifying freedom where you are not just born into a world but compelled to create yourself continually. This freedom is both a gift and a burden. You cannot hide behind fate, tradition, or external authorities. The responsibility lies squarely on your shoulders. Yet most recoil from such freedom, preferring the anesthetizing comfort of prescribed roles, identities, and narratives. Sartre's philosophy dissects the human tendency toward bad faith, the evasion of self-responsibility, by pretending that your identity is fixed or that you are a mere product of circumstance. The ancient truths are potent because they confront this bad faith, challenging you to embrace the terrifying openness of becoming. Viktor Frankl, who survived the deepest abyss of human suffering in the Holocaust, approached this issue from the vantage point of meaning. He argued that the fundamental motivational force in humans is the will to meaning. Without a sense of purpose, the psyche fractures and despair consumes. The problem is that the meaning offered by society is often shallow or imposed, resulting in existential emptiness. To genuinely evolve, you must go beyond inherited purposes and excavate a meaning rooted in self-transcendence. The ancient philosophers' truths are not mere doctrines. They are invitations to craft a purpose forged in the fires of personal trial and transformation. But this forging demands commitment. Half measures are futile. Together, these thinkers uncover a sprawling web of forces that keep the vast majority confined to a shadow existence, where the depths of ancient wisdom remain inaccessible. Your mind, your emotions, your very identity are simultaneously the battleground and the prize. The psychological defense mechanisms protect you from the terror of transformation, while your society's norms pacify the hunger to break free. The very yearning to evolve is entangled with fear, fear of pain, loss, chaos, and annihilation of the self you cling to. Yet this self is an illusion, a fragile construct designed to survive but not to transcend. This hidden, multifaceted resistance, woven from the threads of unconscious shadow, societal sedation, existential dread, and the will's tyranny, explains why only a minority ever claim mastery over these ancient truths. The rest remain ensnared in a paradox where the desire for growth exists, but is continually undermined by the fears and defenses that evolution exposes. This refusal to confront the labyrinth within does not bring peace. It breeds a quiet desperation and a slow suffocation of the soul. But what if this resistance is not merely a curse, but also an invitation? What if the very intensity of this hidden war signals the presence of a threshold, a line that once crossed, irrevocably expands your capacity to live beyond mere survival or superficial comfort? The ancient philosophers' truths are not meant for passive consumption. They are catalytic forces, dynamic and shattering, demanding something from you that goes beyond understanding. They demand commitment, an unrelenting pledge to wrestle with the shadow, embrace discomfort, and reclaim your freedom through radical self-creation. And so the tension tightens. You stand at the edge, caught between the easy illusion of stasis and the daunting unknown of evolution. The undercurrents revealed by psychology, philosophy, and society are shaping every flicker of doubt and every surge of courage within you. To ignore them is to remain bound. To face them is to begin the journey of mastery, where the ancient truths cease to be distant echoes and become living, transformative powers. What lies beyond this confrontation is not merely growth, but a profound rebirth, a cracking open of old shells fashioned by fear and complacency. The consequences of ignoring this inner war are subtle but profound. A life half-lived, potentials unrealized, and a spirit dimmed. Yet the promise of mastery offers a different destiny, a life forged in the fires of commitment to evolve, where ancient wisdom awakens a force within you that no external circumstance can shatter. Will you remain behind the fortress walls of your current self, or will you step into the crucible, confronting the hidden forces that bind you? The path is treacherous, but within the peril lies the only true empowerment. The ancient philosophers' truths do not merely illuminate, they ignite. And now, as the shadows deepen and the first embers of transformation stir within, the path forward begins to emerge. To master the ancient truths, you must first understand not only their content, but the profound reasons why they remain inaccessible to so many. Only then can you claim the power that lies dormant, waiting for those brave enough to commit to the evolutionary fire. Imagine for a moment that you are trapped in a room where every wall, floor, and ceiling is made of invisible glass. You can see beyond, faint shapes of freedom flicker, beckoning you. Yet no matter how fiercely you press your hands against these transparent barriers, you remain confined. This is the silent architecture of your own mind, constructed not by brick or stone, but by the unseen forces of cognitive biases, neurological wiring, and cultural conditioning. These invisible forces shape not only your perception of reality, but the very fabric of society itself, weaving an intricate web that entangles your potential and muffles the voice of evolution inside you. You might ask, how can what you cannot see control your life so completely? The answer lies in the subtlety of the mind's hidden programs. Your brain is not a blank slate, but a battlefield of inherited patterns, evolutionary quirks and learned responses that have crowned themselves king without your consent. Cognitive biases are not just abstract terms from psychology textbooks. They are the lenses through which your mind distorts the world, tailoring every encounter to fit a narrative of safety, predictability, and comfort. Confirmation bias nudges you to seek evidence that supports what you already believe, while the status quo bias shackles you to familiar routines, rotting at the core of your being under the guise of security. These biases may protect you from chaos, but they also blind you to the transformative truths whispered by ancient philosophers, truths that demand courage and upheaval. Even deeper lies the neurological substrate shaping your experience. Your brain's plasticity, though a well-known marvel, is paradoxically limited by the pathways you habitually traverse. Neurons that fire together wire together, but this wiring often resists change, locking you into patterns of thought and behavior that favor survival over evolution. Dopamine rewards familiar achievements and predictable outcomes. Punishments like anxiety loom large when you consider venturing into unknown territory, the territory where these ancient truths reside. The very chemistry that fuels your motivation is a double-edged sword, luring you into shallow gratifications while starving the deeper hunger for transformation. You are caught in an internal economy that values short-term comfort at the expense of long-term mastery. This confinement is not only personal but collective. Cultural conditioning acts as an invisible sculptor, molding the contours of your identity and worldview with a precision that is both hypnotic and relentless. From birth, society implants narratives: what is possible, what is desirable, what is taboo, creating invisible fences that corral your spirit. These narratives masquerade as common sense, as the natural order, embedding themselves so thoroughly that questioning them feels like betrayal or madness. The ancient philosophers warned against the complacency of accepting the given reality, yet the brilliance of their insights is dulled by the sediment of cultural dogma and mass conformity. Societies themselves become echo chambers where truth is distorted into dogma, and evolution is mistaken for mere survival. You might sense by now that this is no trivial predicament. It is an existential trap. The most insidious fact of it all is that you often do not recognize your captivity. The mind, after all, defends its own illusions with the ferocity of a predator guarding its kill. Denial, rationalization, and projection are the guardians of this invisible prison. The paradox is haunting. The more you cling to certainty and comfort, the more you are ensnared by the very forces that keep you from mastering yourself. Your quest for security becomes the chains that bind you. Your yearning for clarity becomes the fog obscuring the path forward. But the urgency to escape this trap is not merely theoretical. It pulses beneath every decision, every moment of hesitation, every dull resignation to how things are. The longer you remain ensnared in these unseen barriers, the more your life erodes under the weight of unrealized potential, fragmented purpose, and a desperate longing for something greater. The unnoticed consequences ripple outward: relationships strained by unacknowledged fears, creativity strangled in the cage of conformity, society stagnated in cycles of repetitive conflict and shallow progress. The invisible glass room extends beyond your personal mind into the collective psyche of humanity, each individual's unseen chains contributing to a global inertia that suffocates evolution itself. Can you feel it? The gnawing tension beneath the surface of daily existence, that silent scream for release. The ancient philosophers, Socrates, Nietzsche, Marcus Aurelius, knew this tension intimately. Their truths were not handed down as mere intellectual exercises. They were maps to dismantle these invisible prisons. Yet these maps remain locked behind the doors of commitment, accessible only to those willing to confront the dissonance of their own conditioning and the neurological comfort of the known. To stumble blindly towards their wisdom is to invite frustration. To embrace it fully is to ignite an evolution of the self at scales both intimate and cosmic. This is why so many encounter these ancient truths and yet remain untouched, like a storm passing over a silent desert. The truths do not simply inform, they demand transformation. They compel the dismantling of cognitive biases, the rewiring of neural pathways, and the reimagining of cultural narratives. But none of this begins without the searing urgency to recognize the very trap that holds you. A trap woven so tightly that not seeing it is, in itself, part of its power. So what is the nature of this trap? It is the illusion of control. The mind promises you stability and mastery through habits, biases, and inherited frameworks. But these promises are false. They are the mirages that keep you wandering the desert of your own limitations. To break free, You must first perceive the glass walls, feel their cold resistance, and dare to push beyond them. Only then can you begin to experience a fracture in the illusion, a crack in the invisible cage that forges a path toward evolution. And yet, even this realization is only the beginning of the journey, because understanding the existence of your confinement does not automatically grant freedom. It is the first painful step on a path that demands relentless commitment. Ancient philosophers did not merely offer teachings, they extended invitations to profound, often agonizing, rebirths of the self. This is the paradox of ancient wisdom. It offers immense power, but only to those who accept the crucible of change. The urgency to awake from this slumber is not only philosophical, it is biological, psychological, cultural. It is the pulse of life itself insisting on evolution or decay. The choice is stark and unforgiving. Remain imprisoned in the illusion of the familiar, or step with trembling courage into the disorienting light of transformation. The cost of inertia is invisibly steep, but the promise beyond is an empowerment that transcends all previous limitations. What it calls for is more than intellectual assent. It demands an unyielding willingness to evolve, to dismantle the silent forces that shape your reality, to rewrite the neurochemical symphony playing inside your brain, and to challenge the cultural narratives that have become chains. Without this commitment, the ancient truths remain distant stars, beautiful, untouchable, and unilluminating. But with it, they become the fire that burns away the glass, setting you free. And this flame, once kindled, does not merely light your path, it transforms the very terrain beneath your feet. The next moment, the breakthrough, is near, but it will emerge only when all these silent forces are confronted with unwavering resolve. Until then, the invisible room remains, its glass walls gleaming with the untouched brilliance of truths waiting to empower those brave enough to claim them. What if everything you believed about growth, control, and self-mastery, those sacred certainties that have quietly governed your inner landscape, were not only incomplete but fundamentally inverted? Imagine the guardrails of your understanding suddenly dissolving, your most trusted maps rendered obsolete. This isn't a subtle nudge toward change. This is an upheaval, a deep rupture in the fabric of your worldview that beckons you to leap into an abyss of uncharted possibility. You stand now at the edge of a radical shift, one that ancient philosophers knew, but that modern thinkers often shy away from. Mastery is not about controlling the self, but about surrendering the illusion of control itself. The mind clings desperately to control because it fears the chaos beneath. Yet, can you grasp the paradox that true power arises not from tightening the grip but from loosening it? This is the radical core of the Stoics, the Taoists, the mystics across time. Seneca warned that we are prisoners of our own desires, chained not by external forces, but by the compulsions we mistake for our identity. Lao Tzu whispered that the river that flows is the river that yields, and only by embracing the flow can power be reclaimed. To break free from the invisible chains, the silent programming of fear, attachment, and illusion, you must first recognize that control as you know it is a mirage, a thin veil over an abyss. Mastery begins with humility before this abyss, not domination of it. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor confined to the marble palaces of absolute power, yet shackled by the torment of his own mind. His journal, the Meditations Asterisk, is a radical manifesto of this surrender, the relentless practice of observing thoughts without attachment, accepting what fate throws, and focusing only on what lies within one's sphere of influence. Here lies a profound counterintuitive truth. Control your perceptions, not the world. Build your fortress inside, unassailable by the shifting chaos outside. The power is not in changing circumstances, but in altering the lens through which you see them. This shift, subtle yet seismic, transforms suffering into strength, victimhood into agency. History is littered with those who shattered their own prisons by embracing this paradox. Consider Epictetus, born into slavery but freed through an internal revolution that made him sovereign over his mind even when shackled physically. Or the 20th century philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti, who shattered dogma not by adding new doctrines but by dismantling the very structure of conditioned thought, insisting that freedom is found only when one stops clinging to known patterns and beliefs. These figures did not master the world. They mastered themselves by relinquishing the false mastery over control. What if mastery is not a destination but a process, a dynamic dance with uncertainty and impermanence? This is the heart of the radical mindset shift you must claim. Instead of building walls to protect a fragile self, you begin building bridges to the unknown. Instead of fearing vulnerability, you use it as the crucible in which strength is forged. Instead of seeking certainty, you commit to curiosity, to perpetual unlearning. This is not weakness. It is the iron will to evolve beyond fixed identities, to rewrite the narrative that you are broken, powerless, or a victim of circumstance. Reclaiming control is about reclaiming the authorship of your experience. It's about dismantling the passive acceptance of life as something that happens to you and stepping boldly into the role of active creator. Imagine tearing down the invisible scripts written by fear, social conditioning, and limiting beliefs. This does not mean an easy escape. It means facing the raw, uncomfortable truth that you are responsible for your internal state regardless of external chaos. This responsibility is not a burden but the fuel for transformation. It is the ignition switch for the revolutionary engine within. Historical revolutions in thought did not happen because people accepted the status quo. They happened because someone dared to question, to challenge deeply held myths, and to rewrite the rules. Galileo faced the Inquisition for daring to say the Earth was not the center of the universe. Nietzsche shattered moral dogma to herald the birth of the Übermensch, a being who creates values rather than accepts them. These paradigm shifts caused tremors in the collective psyche because they demanded a new way of thinking, a breaking free from inherited chains. You too are called to break free in this moment, but the chains are subtler now. Networks of beliefs, conditioned reactions, the silent scripts that dictate your sense of limitation. The ancient truths you seek to master are not found in passive study or intellectual assent. They are found in active confrontation with these chains. The work is in observing your mind without judgment, in challenging the automatic reactions, and in choosing a new path where old patterns once ruled. How? Begin by asking yourself, where am I unconsciously surrendering my power? Which fears or attachments am I mistaking for my identity? Which habitual narratives govern my perceptions? This interrogation is not an exercise in self-flagellation, but an act of radical empowerment, an excavation of the buried self so that a new self can rise. Then comes the hardest part, practicing the surrender of control over these narratives, allowing uncertainty to become fertile ground for growth instead of a threat to stability. This mindset shift also means redefining what success looks like. It is no longer the accumulation of accolades or external validation, but the quiet, persistent evolution of the self. The journey from didactic certainty to open-ended exploration, from rigid identity to fluid presence, from reactive living to creative participation in the unfolding moment. This is the mastery the ancients pointed to, not a crown to be worn, but a garden to be tended. Imagine now, standing on this precipice of change, not with fear but with fierce determination. You hold a key forged from the paradoxical wisdom of ages. Surrender is strength, uncertainty is power, evolution is mastery. This is the revelation that transforms the ancient truths from distant stars to blazing fires within. The terrain beneath your feet is no longer fixed. It is alive, mutable, waiting for you to step into it with boldness and grace. The next step, then, is to build a new way of thinking, a mental architecture designed not to resist change, but to thrive in it. Begin to see obstacles as invitations, suffering as a teacher, and limitation as a doorway. This is not a naive optimism. It is the sophisticated courage to engage life on its own terms, to dance willingly with chaos rather than run from it. You are not a passive observer caught in the swell of history's tides. You are a revolutionary of the inner world, armed with the ancient truths reimagined for your evolution. And in this moment, the power you seek is not distant or external. It is the fierce, incandescent ember already glowing within you, waiting to be fanned into a transformative flame. Look deeper, beyond the shimmers and shadows of your waking reality, into the very bones of existence itself. What if everything you've battled against, every fracture and failure that once seared through your identity, was not a curse but a secret blessing disguised as hardship? What if the ancient philosophers weren't inviting you into some intellectual game, but beckoning you toward a radical unraveling, a profound reweaving of your being that dissolves the illusion of separateness? Consider for a moment the unsettling notion that the self you cling to, the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you've been through, what your limits might be, is nothing more than a carefully constructed mirage. Not your enemy, but certainly not your unchangeable truth. What if this self, meticulously built over years of conditioning, trauma, victories, and losses, is actually a cage? Not a prison wielded by others, but one forged by the very beliefs you hold sacred. The philosophers, the Stoics who preached over and over the power of inner freedom, the mystics who vanished into silence to touch the void, the existentialists who confronted absurdity with defiant authenticity, all whispered the same terrifying and liberating truth. Your reality is malleable, your identity fleeting, and your suffering optional, but only if you dare to see it clearly. This is the cruel paradox they mastered. Only by surrendering the self can you truly own it. Only by stepping through the fire of profound uncertainty can you emerge whole, not fractured. Only through radical evolution does mastery arise. This is why their truths empower only the committed, because evolution is an act of rebellion, an audacious refusal to settle for the familiar chains of your previous self. It demands ferocity, a willingness to burn through old stories, to stare into the abyss without flinching, and to grasp the raw, trembling potential hidden within the chaos. Ask yourself now, have you been clinging to old wounds as if they were badges of honor? Are the narratives of victimhood, limitation, or failure the very foundation of the fortress you call me? The ancient philosophers would not pity you. They would challenge you to dismantle that fortress, brick by brick, to reveal the glowing core beneath. This core is not fixed. It is a living, breathing crucible of becoming. And in that state of becoming, you find a freedom so profound it feels like madness to the uninitiated. A freedom that dissolves not only your pain, but the very grip that pain once held over your being. Imagine now that your past struggles, those seemingly endless cycles of disappointment, fear, and confusion, were not derailments but the chisel sculpting you into a new form. Each moment of suffering, each episode of loss, was a necessary flame burning off the dross, igniting the alchemy of transformation. The ancient wisdom is not a prescription for escape, but an invitation to transmutation. Not to transcend life's trials, but to transmute them, to turn lead into gold within the cryptic furnace of your heart. And here lies the final revelation, the seismic shift that can shatter your entire worldview. Reality is not a fixed backdrop on which your drama unfolds. It is a living, breathing interplay between your consciousness and the cosmos, a vast dance where your evolution shapes the very fabric of existence. When you accept this, when you embody this, every limitation dissolves into possibility. The self you thought was separate is revealed to be a node of cosmic awareness, a point of convergence where ancient truths and future potentials collide. This is the mastery of evolution the ancients spoke of, not mastery over the world, not dominance over others, but mastery over the self as a dynamic, fluid phenomenon. It is the radical realization that you are not merely in the world is in you. Your mind is not a passive receiver of reality. It is a forge where reality is continuously created and recreated. The commitment to evolve becomes the singular act of revolution, where you no longer fight the tides or seek safe harbor, but learn to ride the storm with open arms and a fearless heart. And so you stand now at the threshold of a choice that will echo through every fiber of your existence. Will you clutch the illusion of stability, comforted by familiar wounds and stories? Or will you dare to let them fall away like autumn leaves, revealing the wild, untamed ground beneath, alive, fertile, and pregnant with possibility? Will you step into the alchemical fire, risking everything? For the luminous unknown, the ancient philosophers did not offer easy answers because they knew that true wisdom is lived, not learned. It is forged in the crucible of commitment to continuous evolution, a commitment as terrifying as it is beautiful. The final, haunting truth whispers in the silence between your breaths. You are both the question and the answer, the suffering and the healer, the prisoner and the liberator. Each moment you choose to evolve, you rewrite the narrative of reality itself. Each moment you commit, you fan the ember within, transforming it into a flame that cannot be quenched. Let this revelation burn through the complacency that has numbed you. Let it crack the facade of certainty until you stand raw, exposed, and alive. For in that rawness lies the power to master not just ancient truths, but your own destiny. The power to evolve endlessly, creatively, courageously, becoming not who you were told to be, but who you were always meant to become. Now close your eyes and listen to the ancient echoes within, the pulse of transformation beating in your veins, the vast universe waiting for you to step forward with both humility and audacity. This is your moment to transcend, to evolve, to master, to become the living embodiment of the truths that have waited patiently through the ages for the one willing to claim them, not as doctrine, but as a fierce, irrevocable way of life. And so the journey begins anew, not with a step forward, but with a surrender backward into the infinite mystery of yourself. What will you do with this awakening? Will you run from it, or will you rise? The answer is yours. But know this, the ancient philosophers' truths are never truly lost. They lie waiting for the committed, for the brave, for the ones who choose evolution not as a destination, but as the very pulse of their being. Will you master it?